Right, good morning. Italian market. Now, what I'd like to do here is just to give you a general overview of the market and activity here. Italy is very much a misunderstood country, I think, for a number of reasons, some right and some wrong. But in a lot of ways, Italy is in fact very similar to the UK in terms of its statistics. I got these stats from our great friends at the CIA because I wanted to be completely objective on the whole thing here. So our friends at Foggy Bottom have a wonderful website which gives you a very good photograph of all the various countries throughout the world. And they say that Italy has a population of 61 million, the UK is 63. Purchasing power, that's $1.88 trillion. It's a meaningless figure for two reasons. Meaningless because what the hell is a trillion? You know, it's meaningless. But also because in Italy you've got a black economy, as they call it, of about 17% of the total economic activity there. So if you can add 17% to that figure, you get very close to the UK consumer purchasing power of $2.27 trillion. So again, you know, statistics can be misleading, but the general trend we have in Italy is it's a very rich country, number 7 in the world. GDP per capita is, again, if you add 17% to that figure, it comes very close to ours. The labour force is lower, so obviously we should be seen to be more productive than us. And unemployment, up until, this is last year's figures, unemployment was again similar, although there is a fair amount of hidden unemployment in Italy as well. So you have a very, very rich country, okay, but with its political problems. Now, last year, around September, when this whole Greek thing started, you know, it was beautiful weather in Italy. It really was gorgeous to drive around, the whole place was fantastic. And everybody believed that this is one of those crises, like all crises, Italy will go there, get to the brink and come back without any problem at all. The Italians are great at doing this, mainly because they create the crises themselves most of the time. But suddenly in October, it all got very, very heavy, and it was frightening. You really did look into this abyss. We saw every evening on the TV screens the scenes in Athens, etc. And for a while, we really did believe that we were going down there. We were going down to that route. We looked into the abyss. But luckily, a couple of European leaders and the EU and the Italian President, Napolitano, saw some sense, and our friend here, Silvio Berlusconi, the most amusing politician of his generation, I think, was actually kicked out. There was a sort of an EU-organized coup d'etat, and he stepped down, and his nemesis, Professor Mario Monti, stepped in. Now, whereas Silvio is a very colourful, amusing, entertaining character, the professor is the exact opposite. Okay? And basically what he's doing is he's squeezing the pips out of the Italian taxpayer and just reducing Italian purchasing power to a point where everybody is convinced they have not one single euro in their pockets. So we are getting the full Monty. And it's not a very pleasant experience at all. And it is creating a lot of tension on the market, because the supermarkets up till about 2008 were talking about the problem of the 4th week, that last week in the month before the next sort of salary arrived, when they noticed a dip in consumption. Now they're talking about the 3rd week, the dip starts. The 4th week is almost non-existent, sales are almost non-existent. So the situation at the present, the economic situation in Italy is not at all very good. It's a temporary thing, they will come back, they always do. Italians are incredible people, but for the time being, it is a slightly tight situation. Having said that, the other thing that really people don't understand about Italy, it is the biggest single market for food in Europe. Now, we all know Italian cuisine, we all know how famous it is, we've all got used to drinking cappuccino instead of frothy coffee, we're all drinking espresso, and we're all going out and having these wonderful pasta meals and things like that. And Italian food in the UK is, I find it very boring, but it's very much on the crest of a wave. So you go to any supermarket now, I think you'll find that Italy is taking over a greater and greater share in the food. But in fact, Italy is a transformation economy. So 40% of that pasta, which Italy produces, manufactures and exports, is in fact made with imported cereal. Durum wheat from Canada, from Ukraine. Italy imports also a large amount of soft wheat from the UK for making various products. Italy, all that mozzarella, right? Italy imports 40% of its dairy requirements. It does this in various forms, either liquid cream, semi-processed cheeses, finished product cheeses. but 70% of cheeses eaten in Italy is considered Italian by the consumers. So what they do, there's a sort of a game going on of importing raw material, transforming it and sending it on as Italian. Because Italians do have a very, very strong food culture, which they're very proud. They think they have the best food in the world. They will tell you how they taught the French how to cook. You know, they will tell you all these wonderful things, but at the same time, they are the biggest importers of food in Europe, and the situation is getting worse as far as they're concerned. But the most important thing which for us is it imports 40% of its meat requirements. That's across the board, with the exception of poultry, where they are net exporters. It imports 40% of its meat requirement. So for us, it's a very, very, very interesting market. In fact, in a lot of ways, it should be the most interesting market in the EU. That gives us a total import market of 360,000 tonnes of beef, and a total import market of 34,000 tonnes of lamb. Okay, that's a lot of beef. That's also a relatively large amount of lamb, because Italian lamb consumption is very low. It's 1.5 kilos per capita, whereas over in the UK I think it's 6.3, I think, isn't it? Something like that. So it's a very small market, but again, potentially it's very interesting for us. So if you look at it from a statistical point of view, Italy's the biggest market for meat. In terms of lamb, especially, I'd like to talk about lamb more today. You're talking about a total market of around 88,000 tonnes. The statistics are not reliable. Last year, the UK, in general, exported 6,800 tonnes of lamb to Italy, and I think 65% of that came from Wales, I think, which is a pretty major achievement. But there are still some issues out there which I'd like to go into now. It's not all roses. BSE, do you remember BSE? Over here it seems to be pretty much forgotten, actually, in terms certainly by the consumer or general public. But in Italy, up until very, very recently, it was still a very major issue, especially when you have the press, the daily press and the food press, which is very much dominated by the Italian corporation, only too happy to remind people that in fact BSE was a foreign invention. BSE had in fact been invented in the UK, and therefore they were the victims of this sort of foreign plot against their industry. And they went bashing on about this for a number of reasons. It was only 2 years ago that the largest retail chain in Italy, the Co-op, actually allowed a British product back on their shelves. That was 2 years ago. And you should be proud to know the product they allowed back onto the shelves was Welsh Lamb, PGI. Okay, more about that later. But BSE is still an issue there, but far more of an issue than it is here. But finally, we have begun to, well, we have in fact managed to remove it from the first level of people's consciousness, and it's moved way, way down. So in the end, it's, should we say, not that much of an issue in purchasing power or purchasing decisions. The other thing which you remember, as I do, is foot and mouth disease. This was never a consumer issue. The consumer never really understood what was going on. It was a trade issue. The Italian government did some terrible things to us. And in fact, there is one company in the north of England which is still trying to take the ministry to court, or has taken the ministry to court, as a result of the bans, etc. they put on. But again, that has been forgotten. It is no longer an issue. Completely forgotten, which is a great thing. The main issue which we have still is one of Wales. Where is Wales? What is Wales? Italians don't know much about Wales. They say, is Wales part of England? Which is the first thing to get anybody's back up. But Wales is very much an unknown entity outside the meat sector. And this is one of the things which we have been trying to resolve over the last few years. The other big issue with Italy is, of course, payments. Somebody reminded me earlier just now that there has always been a high risk factor in exporting to Italy. Now this, over the last, one of the good effects of this recent financial crisis is that surprisingly this risk has in fact been reduced, because the issue of insurance for Italian customers has become more and more difficult. Italian customers have in fact begun to pay much more quickly. They pay 8 days, they pay 30 days with small discounts. But what's going to happen later on this month is that the famous Article 62 will come into force, which means that basically fresh meat must be paid within at 30 days. If it's not paid at 30 days, then the supplier must begin to add legal interest to that invoice. Now this is going to be very expensive for the Italian importers that were using these long payments to finance their own activity. And this is going to cause us, we don't know exactly what it's going to cause, but it is going to cause some sort of shake-up to the sector, and it may cause a few bankruptcies. But what will happen in the medium term is that Italy will become a much more interesting market for our exporters, because you remove, with one law, you remove this issue of a long payment, and therefore the worry about getting your money. So it's a very, very effective step forward. In fact, the Italians have in fact copied this from a French law very recently, and everybody's looking forward very much to this taking effect. The other issue which we have in Italy is the quality of the lamb. Now, okay, you've heard how great, well, you know how great Welsh lamb is, but when you look at it from a Mediterranean point of view, it's not quite as good as we may think. Because you have to understand that the Mediterranean system of lamb production is more geared towards cheese. The lamb industry is a dairy industry in the Mediterranean. And in fact, those small lambs, which are quite famous now, are in fact a byproduct of cheese production, which is another reason why they come onto the market around Easter, and why there is much greater lamb consumption around Easter, because 70% of all lamb in Italy is consumed at Easter. It's a byproduct of the dairy industry, so the lambs are literally milk-fed lambs. But they're not fed much milk because they're taken away from them rather as good as possible, because the farmer needs the milk to produce the cheese. So their quality, as far as they're concerned, the top quality, which is Sardinian lamb, is a 6-kilo carcass that's head-on. Okay, it's absolutely white in flesh. The Italians have a thing with white. They love white. Their milk is white. Their favourite cheeses are white. It's not yellow. They're white. So this lamb is white. It's a very, very traditional market. It's eaten at traditional times, like Easter. It's eaten at family events. It's not something which you snack on. It's not something which you would eat in a restaurant that normally, okay? And it has a whole different concept of cooking, which is very, very basic. I mean, over here, we've spent decades trying to develop the famous lamb cuts, the noisettes, etc., etc. They don't do it, just chop it in foam, and just stick it in the oven, and that's it. It's very, very simple. But that is their concept of quality. White flesh, very small carcass, and a very traditional means of production. It's a problem. The other problem for us is the actual shape of the retail market. If you look here, ignore that figure at the top. Look here, you've got supermarkets, 57.3%, which is relatively low. In the UK, it's up around 85% now, I think. Traditional butchers, hey, remember that? 33%. Mini markets, etc., etc., etc. So you're talking about a very, very fragmented retail sector. This means the wholesaler still has a very important role to play. And of course, it's very difficult sometimes to get involved, wholesaler, retailer relationships. It's very difficult for someone like me to get involved in that. But this is the killer. This is the supermarket sector divided down into all its component parts. Okay, so that 55% is in fact broken down into this sort of galaxy of brands, of senior, of companies. You look at the biggest one here, Coop Italia, that's only 15.3% of the total food market in Italy. Now, in one form or another, Welsh Lamb is present in 50% of these. Okay? 50%, which is quite an achievement. But we're going to have to make that greater, and we're going to have to extend and deepen our relationships with these people. So that gives you a general overview of the Italian market. It's a very rich market. It was a very rich market until Mr. Monti arrived. Okay, it's a big market. It's very fragmented markets. You can have great fun doing niche marketing. You can get yourself into all sorts of nice little places to market a product. But the problem is there's an enormous number of people to talk to, and there's an enormously long geographical structure there, and it's also culturally it's very, very difficult. We still have the issue of southern Italy with its mafia and with its heat and everything like that, and unemployment. And we still have the north with its industries, etc. That hasn't changed very much at all. So it can be a very, very difficult market to approach. And also we have the problem of Italians don't know much about Wales. Geography is not their strong point. So what have we done for the last few years? I think the first big thing we did, the greatest impact we had, was when we actually sponsored the Italian national rugby team. We were quite lucky, well, we weren't lucky, we spotted them at a time when they began to win. They joined the Six Nations and they actually began to win a few matches, and that's the famous time they drew a match in Cardiff, and we were lucky to be there with a group of Italian supermarkets, which did us a lot of good, I think. Nothing sells more than sense of victory. It's a historic draw in Cardiff, and we sold, a couple of thousand tons of that now. We sold a lot of lamb as a result of that. But the main point of all this was to put Wales on the map. Right? Suddenly, the meat industry realised where Wales was, what we were, who we were, what we were doing. And we played rugby, and we invited them to games. They began to watch the games on TV. They were shown live on TV, and not on Sky, so people could actually watch it. And as a result, this is the one single biggest thing we've done to put us on the map in terms of wholesale brand. This is where we've been up to now. We've been trying to develop ourselves as a wholesale brand to get into this very, very fragmented market, a whole galaxy of individual players. With this, we managed to finally begin to become recognised and played above our weight in this great game. Also, there's a win with some lady. We used every single trick in the book to get ourselves into the press. Every single trick. When the Prince of Wales came down with his slow food chums, we organised an event, and we had the guy on the right is Carlo Cracco, the 40th best chef in the world. Okay, this was a few years ago before, you'll see him later on. But we used every single trick to get ourselves out there, to get Wales mentioned, to get our product, to get Welsh Lamb mentioned. This was the issue. This was the main problem. Trade shows. If you talk about a market which is long and fragmented, as Italy, the actual trade show assumes an importance which is very difficult for any British or Welsh person to understand, because it's the single point where you can in fact get people together and actually sit down and talk. Now for me, if I were to have to go out and visit every one of these customers, it would take me 6 months, and it would be something like 30,000 miles. It would be absolutely astronomical. But at least here, they can come to you. And it's very, very important. The importance is not the size of the stand, it's just the concept. You can present your strategy, but also you can be there. And the meetings which you have at these trade shows have over the last few years been very, very important. You may have heard of the Rome Schools Initiative, which we've been supplying PGI Welsh Lamb to the Rome school canteens for the wee kiddies there for the last 6 years. That contact came as a result of a contact at Cheapers Trade Show in Parma, as a direct result. Okay, and that's one of the best things that this industry has done in Italy. So the trade shows are absolutely essential. The trade press assumes importance, which is great, and it's over here, because again, it's the only way I can really get my voice out to everybody. They take the mickey at me because I'm in there every month, one form or another. But it's essential. We use them like in-house magazines, like newsletters. Actually, it's very, very important to get our voice, to get our images, to get our faces out there the whole time. They mustn't forget us, they mustn't forget us, they mustn't forget us. So we're constantly presenting there. Constant PR activity. Again, this is Carlo Cracco, a few years later with a beard, who now is the 39th best chef in the world. He's been up and down a bit. But more important than that, he's the main star of the Italian MasterChef television program. So he's a media personality in his own right. He's now been used. I think at the moment he's in 3 different adverts on Italian TV. Obviously taking the mickey out of his own personality, with 3 different adverts on Italian TV. And he is very, very keen on Welsh Lamb. He thinks it's great. He's been over here, he's been to the Royal Welsh. He thinks we have a wonderful product. And he's very, very keen to help us. And he's always going to help us again. Again, things like this are so much more important in a place like Italy to get ourselves out there the whole time than in other markets. Again, the Minister Association came out and did a good job for us. So basically what we've done over the last few years is to present Wales not only as a nation producing lamb, but also to present the idea of a culture of lamb production. One of the most effective weapons we have is in fact the Royal Welsh Agricultural Show. For the last 6 years I've been bringing people over there, and every time I brought somebody over there, an interesting and important contract has developed. So 3 years ago I brought the Co-op supermarket chain over here This was the first, we were banned completely. They came over here, they spent a whole day at the Royal Welsh wandering around. I think they took about 200 photographs and came back with bags full of junk, really. Never seen anything like it. It's like my... As a result of that, 2 months later, we were listed. Welsh Lamb PGI was listed in co-op supermarkets. And in fact, this year, earlier on this year, with the minister, we visited a big hypermarket near Modena, where they had in fact started to repack, gas flush, and brand the product at point of sale, and it was excellent. It's taken a while to get there, but we are in fact getting it. This is as a result of what they saw when they came over. They saw an industry which was very much part of the social fabric. They saw an industry which was streets ahead of where they are in terms of technology, in terms of organization, in terms of volume, in terms of price, and in terms of quality. Now, as we've seen, their concept of quality is different from ours, but with the PGI status, we can project not only that product, we can actually project the quality of that product to the Italian consumer very, very simply, because they recognize PGI as quality. So that is basically what we've been doing for the last few years, and in fact, I think where we are now, this is the first step in the future. I think that PGI Welsh Lamb is now the leading trade brand in Italy. And I think you should all be quite proud of that, because it's something which no other meat product has achieved on the Italian market. Okay? Thank you.